On March 14, 1988, in the small town of Bondoukoui in western Burkina Faso, a boy was born into a humble family. His parents named him Ibrahim Traoré. At the time, Burkina Faso was a land marked by poverty, political turbulence, and a long history of colonial shadows. The country, once called Upper Volta, had been renamed Burkina Faso by the legendary revolutionary Thomas Sankara in 1984. Sankara had given the nation a new identity, the land of upright people. His bold reforms, his resistance to foreign domination, and his dream of African dignity remained alive in the hearts of many Burkinabé, even after his assassination in 1987. For young Ibrahim, these stories of Sankara were not abstract history lessons. They were whispered in homes, discussed in village gatherings, and retold by elders as a reminder that Burkina Faso once had a leader who dreamed big. Though Ibrahim was only a child, he grew up hearing these tales. And deep inside, the seeds of leadership, patriotism, and resistance were sown. Bondoukoui itself was not a place of power or wealth. It was rural, traditional, and filled with the struggles of everyday survival. Ibrahim grew up like many African children, playing barefoot football, on dusty fields, helping his parents with chores, and studying by candlelight when electricity failed. His family valued discipline, respect, and education, and they instilled these values in him. Unlike many who dreamed of escaping the hardships of rural life, Ibrahim carried a different dream. From a young age, he showed a deep sense of responsibility and courage. Teachers recalled him as quiet but determined, intelligent but humble. He was not loud, but when he spoke, people listened. Ibrahim excelled in school, and eventually earned admission to the University of Ouagadougou, one of the most prestigious institutions in the country. He chose to study geology, a field that fascinated him with its blend of science and connection to the earth. To many, geology seemed an unusual choice for someone destined to become a military officer, but for Ibrahim, it reflected his curiosity and desire to understand the natural foundations of his homeland. At the university, he wasn't only a student. He became a member of the Association of Muslim Students of Burkina Faso, where he took an active role in organizing and mobilizing fellow students. This experience was crucial. It was here that he began to develop leadership qualities, learning how to bring people together, defend their interests, and articulate a vision. These student years also exposed him to the political instability that gripped Burkina Faso. The country had gone through multiple coups since its independence in 1960. Governments rose and fell, often under the influence of foreign powers. For students like Ibrahim, these turbulent events were reminders that the future of Burkina Faso required leaders who were both courageous and uncompromising in defending sovereignty. During this period, Ibrahim also grew more politically aware. He read widely, studied African leaders like Kwame, Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, and of course, Thomas Sankara. These figures became guiding lights in his worldview. Leaders who dared to defy colonial powers and build nations on dignity. While his academic life shaped his intellect, it was the military that forged Ibrahim's discipline and leadership. After completing his studies, Ibrahim chose to join the Burkina Faso army. To many, this was a surprising move. Why would a promising geology student, with opportunities for a professional career, opt for the rough and uncertain life of a soldier? But for Ibrahim, the decision was clear. He saw the military as the true school of discipline and service, a place where he could defend his people directly. He believed that protecting the nation was the highest calling. He enrolled in Burkina Faso's military training academies, where he quickly distinguished himself. His colleagues described him as brilliant, disciplined, and fearless. He was not the strongest physically, but he was known for his endurance, sharp mind, and ability to lead under pressure. Ibrahim rose through the ranks steadily. His career coincided with the increasing threat of terrorism and jihadist insurgency in Burkina Faso and the broader Sahel region. Beginning in the mid-2010s, extremist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS spread across Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Villages were attacked, civilians were massacred, and thousands were displaced. The Burkinabe army, under-equipped and under-trained, struggled to respond. Ibrahim was deployed to several frontline regions, where he experienced firsthand the suffering of his people. These years hardened him, but they also deepened his commitment to defend the nation at all costs. By the early 2020s, Ibrahim had risen to the rank of captain. At just his early 30s, he was one of the youngest officers entrusted with commanding men in critical operations. His leadership style set him apart. He was not the kind of officer who commanded from the safety of an office. He was always with his men on the front lines, sharing their dangers and their hardships. Soldiers admired him for eating the same food, marching the same long distances, and fighting the same battles as them. To many, he became a symbol of integrity and courage, a leader who did not exploit his position for privilege. But as Ibrahim fought on the battlefield, he also became increasingly frustrated with the political leadership in Ouagadougou. The Burkinabe government, led by successive presidents, failed to provide the army with proper equipment, training, or strategy. Corruption siphoned off resources that should have gone to soldiers. Politicians made promises, but in villages, people continued to die at the hands of terrorists. The army's morale collapsed. Soldiers felt abandoned, and many began to desert. Communities accused the government of neglect. Burkina Faso seemed to be crumbling. For Ibrahim, the situation was intolerable. He believed that the government was failing the people, and that something had to change. He was not alone. Many younger officers, inspired by his courage, shared the same frustration. In January 2022, a military coup took place in Burkina Faso. President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore was overthrown by Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, who promised to restore security and defeat terrorism. For a while, many Burkinabe placed their hopes in Damiba. But within months, disappointment grew. Damiba, despite his promises, failed to deliver. Attacks by terrorist groups continued, spreading fear across the country. Villages were abandoned, people fled their homes, and the death toll mounted. Ibrahim Traoré, who had supported the initial coup, now grew disillusioned. He and other officers saw that Damiba was more interested in securing his own power than in truly liberating the nation. While soldiers died on the front lines, Damiba appeared disconnected and unable to act decisively. The breaking point came in September 2022. Insurgents carried out devastating attacks, killing dozens of soldiers and civilians. The army was demoralized, and the people were angry. In the barracks, whispers of rebellion grew louder, and at the center of this growing movement was Captain Ibrahim Traoré. At just 34 years old, Ibrahim decided to act. He believed that the survival of Burkina Faso required bold leadership, and he was ready to risk everything. Along with loyal officers, he organized a new coup. On September 30th, 2022, Ouagadougou erupted in tension. Gunfire echoed as soldiers loyal to Traoré clashed with those still supporting Damiba. After hours of confrontation, Damiba was forced to resign. In a dramatic statement, Traoré announced that the old leadership had failed and that a new era was beginning. The young captain declared himself president of Burkina Faso. The world was stunned. At 34, Ibrahim Traoré had become the youngest head of state in the world. But for Burkinabe citizens, especially the poor and oppressed, his rise was a source of hope. They saw in him a leader who was young, courageous, and uncorrupted by the old system. In the streets of Ouagadougou, thousands gathered to celebrate, waving flags and chanting his name. From the very beginning, comparisons were made between Ibrahim Traoré and Thomas Sankara. Both were young military leaders who rose to power in times of crisis. Both spoke of sovereignty, dignity, and resistance to foreign domination. And both inspired ordinary Burkinabe with their boldness. Ibrahim himself never denied this connection. He often invoked Sankara's spirit, presenting himself as a continuation of the struggle for an independent and self-reliant Burkina Faso. He promised to restore the dignity of the people, to empower the army, and to resist the influence of foreign powers who had long manipulated African nations. But he also knew the dangers. Sankara had been assassinated by his close ally Blaise Compaoré in 1987, a betrayal that haunted Burkina Faso for decades. For Traoré, the lesson was clear. To succeed, he had to remain vigilant, disciplined, and deeply connected to the people. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré assumed power on September 30th, 2022, Burkina Faso was in deep turmoil. Villages were burning under terrorist attacks, the economy was crumbling, and more than 2 million citizens had been displaced from their homes. To many, the young leader was stepping into an impossible battlefield. But Traoré carried with him a message of determination. Burkina Faso would not collapse under foreign influence or endless insecurity. He promised that his government, unlike those before, would prioritize the people, restore the dignity of the army, and defend sovereignty at all costs. In his first public appearances, he dressed not in the suits of politicians, but in the simple camouflage uniform of a soldier, signaling that he remained one of the people, not above them. His calm but firm voice carried the weight of conviction, reminding Burkinabe of another young officer decades earlier, Thomas Sankara. Traoré's government quickly began making bold changes. He redirected resources to the military, ensuring soldiers received better equipment and support. Unlike past leaders who only made promises, he personally visited frontline regions, boosting morale and showing that he stood side by side with his men. Understanding that the fight against terrorism required more than soldiers, Traoré launched the recruitment of tens of thousands of civilian volunteers. These volunteers for the defense of the homeland became a grassroots force, symbolizing unity between the army and the people. One of his most controversial but defining moves was his break from France, the former colonial power. French troops who had long operated in Burkina Faso were told to leave. For many citizens, this was an act of courage, proof that Traoré was serious about restoring sovereignty. He also sought closer ties with other African nations, particularly Mali and Niger, who faced similar battles against insurgents. Traoré encouraged policies of self-reliance, echoing Sankara's philosophy. He urged citizens to consume local products, to farm, and to rebuild communities displaced by violence. His speeches often returned to themes of dignity, independence, and collective struggle. Yet leadership was far from easy. The terrorist threat remained real, and attacks continued, though his government made progress in reclaiming certain territories. Internationally, his rejection of French influence angered Western powers, leading to tensions with foreign governments. Internally, some elites feared his popularity and boldness. At just 34 years old, many questioned whether he had the experience to manage a fragile state. Opposition voices accused him of concentrating power in the military, but Traoré responded not with fear, but with conviction. In interviews and speeches, he emphasized that the Burkinabe people were ready to suffer and sacrifice if it meant building a future free of foreign domination and endless corruption. His authenticity resonated with ordinary citizens, especially the youth, who saw in him a leader who finally spoke their language. What made Ibrahim Traoré unique was not only his youth but his message. Across Africa, where many nations suffered under terrorism, corruption, and foreign exploitation, Traoré became a symbol of hope. He openly spoke of the need for Africa to unite, to free itself from neo-colonial systems, and to embrace dignity. His words reached far beyond Burkina Faso, inspiring young Africans from Dakar to Kinshasa. Many began calling him a new Sankara, not because he copied the past, but because he carried the same spirit of resistance and vision for sovereignty. His decision to align Burkina Faso with other Sahel countries created the idea of an African alliance against terrorism and foreign interference. Though risky, it signaled a new era of cooperation rooted in independence. As of today, Ibrahim Traoré's leadership is still a story in progress. He faces immense challenges: the persistence of armed groups, the fragile economy, and the expectations of a hopeful but impatient population. Yet his vision remains clear: a Burkina Faso that is sovereign, self-reliant, and dignified. A nation where the army and the people stand united. An Africa that refuses to be a pawn in the games of foreign powers. In one of his most powerful declarations, Traoré said, "We are ready to accept all the sacrifices, but we will not kneel before anyone. Burkina Faso will rise again." At only 34 years old when he rose to power, Ibrahim Traoré became the youngest head of state in the world. Whether history will remember him as a fleeting figure or as the man who transformed Burkina Faso depends on the battles still ahead. But one thing is certain: in the hearts of millions, he has already lit a fire of hope and resistance. Like Sankara, before him, Traoré represents the belief that even in a small, struggling nation, courage and integrity can inspire a continent. His story is not yet finished, but it is already a reminder that leadership is not about age or wealth, but about vision, sacrifice, and the will to fight for one's people.